Well, a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome and welcome once again to our East Africa Law Society Capacity Building session. And today, ladies and gentlemen, while you join in, we kindly request you to share our link with participants who may be interested in joining this session. And we'll be streaming the same live on Facebook and our YouTube channel at East Africa Law Society. So this afternoon, we are profoundly honored to have this exceptional session that is held by the East Africa Law Society Young Lawyers Forum, and it's focusing particularly on breaking barriers as a young legal practitioner. And today we are discussing unlocking opportunities in the global legal space. I know many of us out there aspire to join these global legal spaces, and sometimes we do not know how to get there. But this afternoon, we are very privileged to have what I would call Africa's brightest young minds, minds that are transforming the continent from across the different jurisdictions. We'll be listening from them. Some of them have worked at top tier international law firms. Some of them have gone to the best universities that there is in the world and are serving at very high portfolios. And some of them are in the academia, some of them are in private practice and have set up distinguished uh, practice areas that we haven't actually anticipated. So this afternoon, we are going to dive deep into the intricacies of how to get there. How can we unlock opportunities? How can we thrive in the global legal spaces? And this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to have Miss Elizabeth Musikali. Miss Musikali is a lecturer of law at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, and she's also a chairperson of the East Africa Law Society Corporate Law Committee. And just recently, she celebrated her birthday. So happy birthday, Elizabeth, belatedly though. We celebrate you and thank you for always making time for being with us and for steering such conversations. This afternoon, we are really happy that you accepted to do the same, and we are ready for the session now. You can take us through the session till 4 p.m. and give us the house keeping rules. So over to you, Elizabeth.
Right. Thank you so much, Gabriel, and thank you for the belated birthday wishes. And I'd like to welcome everyone here today, both the panelists and the attendees. Thank you for making time to join this very interesting discussion this afternoon on breaking barriers and unlocking opportunities, strategies, and challenges for the young lawyers in global legal spaces. So as Gabriel has said, this session will last for 2 hours, where we will go through we'll have a panel discussion on this topic, and then the last 30 minutes will be dedicated solely to Q&A. So as the panelists take us through, kindly, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box, and any comments, we will go through them at the end. Right, so globally, the legal profession has witnessed significant changes in recent years, which are fueled by cross-border trade, the expansion of international organizations, and the growth of the importance of global governance. Young lawyers today are facing a rapidly transforming legal landscape that requires them to adapt to new trends, especially in technological innovation, in the rise of ADR, and in the increased focus on human rights law. And in addition to this, there's the integration of international laws in domestic systems. And despite these changes, young lawyers often encounter numerous barriers when trying to break into the global legal arena. Now, these barriers include limited access to global networks, the complexity of international legal frameworks, the challenge of obtaining relevant experience in international law, and the evolving demands of clients in an increasingly interconnected world. These hurdles, as we'll see, present opportunities for innovation, growth, and development of new legal practices that could redefine the profession. Now, in this webinar, we aim to unpack the specific strategies and opportunities available to young lawyers to overcome such challenges and build their careers on the global stage, and to navigate an increasingly interconnected and dynamic legal ecosystem. Additionally, we'll talk about the importance of mentorship and continuous legal education, such as what you're doing, and networking as integral tools for young lawyers who seek to expand their influence beyond national borders. Now, to take us through this discussion today, we have three panelists with us. We have Mr. Silva Kayondo, who is a partner at Otis Advocates based in Kampala, Uganda. And his key specialisms include technology law, media, telecoms, space and satellite, and emerging regulatory aspects of AI, cloud facilities, outsourcing, and ESG. Now, he's one of East Africa's respected thought leaders on business futurism, de-risking, and strategic positioning. He has previously done a secondment at the Dubai office of the global law firm White & Case under the auspices of ILFA. And he holds a Master of Laws in Banking and Financial Regulation from the University of Pretoria in South Africa. Welcome, Silva. We also have with us...
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes, we also have with us Davina Manyasi, who is a distinguished legal practitioner with a strong focus on technology law, data protection, and privacy and regulatory compliance. Additionally, she's a legal counsel specializing in data privacy and compliance and providing strategic legal guidance on emerging regulatory frameworks across Africa. She also has a background in litigation, corporate advisory, and legal tech, and has advised startups, venture capital firms, and multinational corporations on navigating complex legal landscapes. She's also an active member of the ELS Committee of Technology, Law and Media, as well as the ICT and IP Committee of the Law Society of Kenya and Nairobi chapter. Davina is also passionate on mentorship, access to justice, and leveraging technology to enhance legal practice. She also regularly engages in thought leadership, speaking in industry events, and contributing to legal publications. Karibu, Davina.
Thank you so much.
And now we also have Mr. Michael Butera, who is the Chief Technical Advisor at the Ministry of Justice in Rwanda, where he plays a pivotal role in legal advisory, governance, and justice transformation. And he has extensive experience in this particular sector and has been instrumental in modernizing Rwanda's legal framework to align with international standards. Now, additionally, he specializes in leveraging technology for legal efficiency, policy formulation, and capacity building within judicial institutions. He's passionate again as well about empowering young lawyers to embrace innovation and contributing to shape justice systems across Africa. His expertise also spans across legal reform, ADR, and digital transformation within the legal sector. Now, I once again thank you so much for joining us today. And we will start with Mr. Kayondo, who will basically be talking about unlocking opportunities beyond traditional legal roles. And start us off, Mr. Kayondo. The legal profession is evolving beyond traditional roles. What are some of the emerging opportunities that young lawyers can explore?
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Just to confirm, are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. So it's a huge opportunity, to be here and to talk about this. In so many ways, I can actually see my own career sort of evolution in this talk that we're going to have. But I think before I go to your question, I think I need to revisit what are these barriers? When we talk of barriers, what do we mean? These are the impediments to maybe successful career building. And career building is a notional thing, depending on how someone measures it. For some, it's the satisfaction arising from the impact of your work. For someone, if maybe they sit and write a position paper and maybe influence a bill. I know right now AI is the frenzy. Everyone is coming up with a bill, with a strategy, with a national plan. For some, that will be defined as success. For others, it will be maybe pay me for that sort of work that I've done, and your success is measured in financial terms. For others, it might be academic. Yeah, I've written a paper, and the thrill about that is that I've done the first AI blueprint for the East African region, and then that's in and of itself is success. But when we talk of this, those barriers and impediments are also clustered. These might be technical barriers in the sense that what you want to do may not have been taught to you at school. You want to do ESG, but it's a patchwork of you studied environmental law, yeah, but I don't know if there are any schools teaching carbon credits or that type of stuff. So that could be one. The other barrier could be cultural. I mean, you could want to be a specialist in Islamic finance, for instance, but not everyone is going to master the key terminologies of that specific practice area. But even if you are able to master the technology, there are also the trust aspects that come on the demand side. The demand side, I'm talking of a client. A client may not trust you just especially if you're going with some cultural, the most common could be geographical jurisdiction.
You're breaking up a bit.
8, 9, 55 up. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Am I clearer now?
Yeah, you're clearer now. Right. I believe we can, as Mr. Kayondo joins back in, I think, well, I can see you better now. Can proceed.
Okay. I hope I can be heard. Yeah, this is also one of the barriers I want to talk about, the technological barriers, that even with 2, 3 internet service providers, still, I'm not able to connect. The other barriers could be, time zone things. You want to do maybe legal process outsourcing, which is a form of BPO that people will pay you when you're domiciled in Kenya or in Uganda, but you still have to marshal. If you want to do work in Hong Kong or in New York, you have to contend with those. In my early days of my practice, I actually used to do a lot of this. I became known as the lawyer who was always awake at 2 or 3 a.m. when clients wanted legal opinions in Japan or in Hong Kong. You're able to charge a premium because the switchability is very low. If they want it there and then, the markets are moving. The markets don't close, especially if you're doing capital markets work. People are looking at hedging positions. People are looking at immediate decisions that can be taken. They've had all these political risk involvements, say, in the region and want to understand them and how they influence their bonds and all these types of things. So all those are the kinds of things. So for me, to your question around what type of opportunities, I think the opportunities are immense because, Elizabeth, are you hearing me? It was showing a mute on my end. I don't know. But what I'm saying, the point I'm making is that, look, the law governs everything from minerals in the ground to the airspace and everything in between. All our countries are signatories to the Moon Treaty. Don't ask me what we do there. I know we've been launching a bit of satellites across, so everything you touch is an opportunity. We have fertility centers coming up in the region, surrogacy, GMOs and plants, flowers, cannabis, smoking and environment, you know, plastics, electronic waste. So for me, I really think it's just about a practitioner just being able to attune within themselves and just see around you what are the pressing issues. We have issues around cancer and non-communicable diseases now. Surely, don't lawyers have a role to play in that beyond writing wills and, you know, estate planning for, you know, people who are under hospice care? We have things, this emerging middle class is coming up with, you know, all these pets and things like that, you know, pet trusts, all these elderly care facilities, because one fundamental thing around middle class is that you will not be there to look after your parent full time. So wherever they are, they'll need elderly care. With elderly care comes facilities they need, comes all the things. Consumer protection stuff, you know, all these fintechs we are into all these sort of digitization platforms we have, independent contractor rights. I've been seeing all these rulings in Kenya about, you know, gig economy workers and all these fact checkers, you know. So really, I'll pose it at that, but I just think the biggest barrier for me that I see here is a mindset barrier. The way we've been taught law as a very abstract and theoretical thing, rather than a relational thing, that to know that even right now as we're exchanging, legal practice is happening. It's being intermediated by a phone or a device. That gadget you have, there is patent law to it, there is tech law to it, there is ISP law and liability to it. If I say untrue things about Elizabeth, which I do not intend to do, there could be a cause of action in defamation. All that's law, you know. So let me pause it there and give other contributors a chance to also participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silva, for that introduction. That is quite exclusive. And because you've talked about the emerging areas of the law, we've talked about AI, etc. What about the human rights aspect? Take us through that. We have Divina Manyasi, and basically, what role does young lawyers play in shaping global human rights and social justice discourses?
Thank you once again.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so young lawyers bring fresh perspectives and innovative approaches and a strong commitment to justice. Yeah. So when you look at how young lawyers handle various cases or various basically challenges that are posed to them in their day-to-day work, they have to come in with the ways how they can work within that space. So when it comes to how they can play a role in shaping global human rights and social justice discourse, they can use various avenues like participating in research and draft legal frameworks. Most of the time you'll find international organizations or even your local organizations that are drafting certain policies or treaties or legislative amendments. They kind of look for volunteers who can assist in drafting those policies, who can assist in research for those treaties, who can assist in legal amendments at the national and international level. Even the international organizational bodies, when they come into a country, they basically look at the local organizations that are there to help them navigate the legal structures and the systems within. So a young lawyer who basically maybe is starting out within a certain area, if they're looking towards human rights on the technological side, they can volunteer their skills in research and to assist this organization in drafting those policies and carry out the research for the same. They can also assist in litigating strategic cases. So if you look at the civil organizations, like in Kenya, we have Kituo Sharia. Most of the times they put out emails and notices to the public where if there is a student or who is still in law school, or if there's somebody who's willing to give their skills, they can volunteer those skills to them, or even for a stipend. And they give you the period as to how long you're going to be participating in these strategic cases and what you can contribute to that. And participating in these cases can help you hone your skills, because when it comes to litigation, it's not about the arguments alone that you present in court, but it's also the information that you gain as you research, as you prepare the documents, and also the decision that will come out of the litigation process in itself helps to shape the policies and helps inform the legal framework within the country. So if you're looking towards shaping the global human rights and social justice discourse, you can participate in strategic cases in the area that you've decided to have a niche in. And there's also leveraging technology. As my colleague has pointed out, we now have AI, we have various machine learning, blockchain that you can use in your day-to-day, not fully just dispose your functions to it, then lay back, but you can use it to learn information that wouldn't be readily available, let's say in your local library or in your handset. You can leverage the same. And also the social media platforms as well. You have LinkedIn, you have Twitter that you can use to drive discourse to certain topics. And a case study of that can be Kenya. We had the finance bill from even way before the protest in itself. You saw the discourse that took place part on X Spaces, where young people were leading the charge and making conversations around the area, trying to educate each other, even using local languages as to what the bill pertains it and why they're rejecting it, or how you can basically access the public participation spaces and contribute to the same, which was a very powerful way of utilizing social media in itself. You can also use LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a lot of professionals in there, but the discourse that is usually carried out in such spaces gives you more information than you already have. It gives you a fresh perspective. It gives you a global scale as to discussions, because you're not speaking to people who are available in Kenya only, but the African region, and also in different parts of the world, because people will tell you, oh, okay, but in our country, this is how it is done because we have such and such a law, and it will help to inform you the topic that you're carrying out. Then there's the advocacy and awareness. Most of the time, if you look around different communities, they do have their groups. Yeah, the civil society groups, they have the legal groups. Like in Kenya, we have it's a legal hacker society. So basically the legal hacker society brings in lawyers. It doesn't matter if you're still in school or you've started working, whatever you can contribute to that society, whether it's knowledge or your skills in drafting, that you can use to help the local startups within the country that cannot afford the regular fees that legal firms usually charge. And you find that the impact is really large. And you also bring them on to the platform where they can contribute to the bills that are being drafted and the public participation, and how they can participate the same as a group and drive impact in such ways. So yeah, basically young lawyers can be strategic in litigation, media advocacy, and leveraging technology to shape global human rights and social justice discourse.
Thank you very much, Davina, for that. Again, there are a lot of resources being shared. If you have any questions on that, maybe you can ask on the chat box for more information. And we go on to Michael Butera. We're still talking about technology. How can young lawyers leverage technology to enhance access to justice in Africa?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I really take it personal that you didn't mention where I went to school. I'm joking, but I won't forgive that next time. So yes, fantastic question. So I think that young people have somehow synonymously been equated to tech. So every time you see someone young, I think we are growing in an era where people think that young people are quite sharp with these old devices. You know, if there's a new ChatGPT or if there's a DeepSeek today, you're likely to guess that young people are mostly on the top of all these tools. And not some old folks in a ministry seated when they're 70 years old. They really don't care about most of these innovative ideas and all that. They wish to, but of course, there's that fastness and everything that young people have embraced. I think that definitely presents a chance for young people, that if you're viewed as very progressive, very innovative, very creative, then just that gives you a chance to knock on every door and say, okay, I'm here to change things. And they're very expectant. I would say that very special case is Rwanda. Rwanda has invested heavily in this idea of trying to let young people actually take the lead on almost all these things. So the government understands that the future definitely belongs in the hands of the young people, and therefore they can shape the future. And if you want to match up the rest of AI, of tech, of all these emerging technologies, then you want to trust young people to take the lead and to take the rest, and not so with that, and especially in public sector, when we come in, we find a lot of great chances of intervening, right? Even training people how to use all these large language models. How do you even, engineer, like how do you prompt engineer specific, questions you want to feed in ChatGPT or any other government-sponsored model? Also, all these chances, and they're looking forward to actually see what we can bring on the table. There are very few legislators, policymakers who understand how you can use the blockchain to really keep, proper public security records. Very, very hard. You'd have to explain what a blockchain is, how is it different from the archives. So all these are really like ripple intervention points that you can now bring in, what you went to learn from school. So, and that because of that, unique position. So one is there's a perception that you're very young, fast, and you somehow connected to tech. So there's that one. So it's kind of like like a straight 50% chances to actually slide in and actually do proper impact. Second is that even if you're not really very much exposed to tech, not everyone specializes in technology laws. I did a lot of tech transfers. I have done so much work on licensing agreements between Rwanda and other governments, or between Rwanda with other private companies, including OpenAI. All these are projects, but sometimes I didn't learn exactly how to come up with a transfer, a license or a tech transfer. But I was very versatile in learning very quickly that actually this is a new thing that we might need in government of Rwanda. So you learn very quickly, you get to understand all these new terms, you get even to experience, So with that, so you just have a tool of being very sharp, very dynamic. You're still young, so you're not already pre-exposed with different ideas. The things don't change, or we do things this way here. So these are most of the speeches we get from old folks. So we tell you, we do things this way here. But you don't walk in with that mindset when you're young. So you just come in and you want to disrupt everything, but also positively saying, look, actually, I think we can do this, instead of taking all the gazetted laws, now we're introducing something in the judiciary of Rwanda where we are trying to really model if anyone was educated in an American or UK or even Kenya, actually, we used to use a lot of, for lawyers, things like Westlaw, right? Where you just have a case law, and if you want to, decide on a case and you want to fetch from the precedents that have been, passed previously, then you'd go into the search and just, put, let's say, subject matter was bouncing check, so bouncing check, and you will get, prompt responses that are very much like with your situation. So that's how we got case law. But now we're telling the judiciary of Rwanda, look, we're not going to use all these, very traditional search engine where you have to go on Google and type, you have to know the case, or you have to ask a friend. So we're saying, look, we're going to have an AI-empowered tool where we're going to train all we're going to take both case law and our laws, which almost like, ranked almost 10K, and then you've got 2,500 cases, and then put them in a model and then train it very quickly to learn, so that when you prompt and you have a specific case issue, and then you want to get like prompt very accurate, near to 100% precedents, then you get them. But also you can get a prompt judgment. So a judge won't start from scratch. They would start from a prompt judgment that already been generated from this massive information, this massive data that have been compiled over a period of time. Now, what we're not seeing is that that was always done, at least for a judge to do a proper comparative analysis, would go at least for 3 weeks, to get a proper judgment, put together something that really resonates with the case. But now we can observe that can be done within 25 minutes. Because what you need to do is really to come up with this. And your job is not really primarily to do proper research, is now to really validate or now examine whether actually these cited cases are actually, present as the specific issues. So these are things a young person has to bring in, and you have to really do a lot of preaching to what you find. I mean, you have to be very humble and have to say, okay, I found these systems in place. I found these these programs working, but how can we innovate? How can we create new areas? So that seems to me that has been left to young people. I don't know, no one said this, but for some reason, if you're talking about innovative new product, if you're talking about, it has just been declared to be, a young people's project. For me, that is just a standalone, chance to say, okay, you already have that perception of trust from people who matter, policymakers, government institutions, private sectors. They all have this consensus that young people are likely to be familiar with all these projects and are likely to actually to this project. And it's true in action. So for me, I would say, now then young people just need as well to, walk the talk and say, actually, we can do this. We can do this if you trust this with. And second, and I think second is that then you need to align, all human beings are strategic, and you have to be very strategic, and then align your personal interest with where you see the world is heading. I can say that everything keeps changing. OpenAI told us that without 6 billion, you can't come up with a large language model very powerful like the OpenAI 4.0. It's until recently that DeepSeek told us that you just need 6 million to train the same model like AI, and actually even be more. But I could talk to all startups in Rwanda and tell them, look, guys, do you think you can develop something for the Judiciary of Rwanda, for the Minister of Justice, really that is akin to ChatGPT? And they would tell you, no, you need actually 6 billion. So that's actually amount of money that is out of the reach of any ecosystem, startup ecosystem in Rwanda. Not even Nigeria would afford that, which we know that it's very expensive in terms of, raising funds and all that. So, and the question was, when this news came out, when DeepSeek told us, look, we just only use 6 million to train the same model, very powerful, actually more than GPT. And I was calling all the startups and asking them, why didn't you try? Because these guys just did it for 6 million. You didn't try. So it's that again, also the mind shift. The young people need to start thinking that, look, we're almost on the same point with the cutting edge technologies like ChatGPT. You just need to sit down and actually, try to work so hard, but contextualizing the risks, but also the problems that, for example, in Rwanda, that Rwandans face. So responding to, practical issues, not some imaginary, a Silicon Valley, innovation solutions, which they will come here, they won't sell. I've been the link between private sector and the public sector, where I tell them, look, we want this product. You're giving us a different product. Either it's extremely too advanced for our people in the public sector, or it's responding to an existing problem, or it's just backward in a sense that you didn't consult our realities on the ground. So again, I'm speaking mostly from public sector. Straight after school, I went public sector. I had no chance to really, indulge in private sector. But in public sector, there is, at least from Rwanda, again, I have to put that caveat, is there's too much trust in young people, right? It has been tested, they can do so much work. And when they come in, they're allowed, they're kind of like afforded that disruptive space, right? So you kind of like, we've been given a sphere of impact. Like you can do this. You can tell us. You're given time to really like venture into reading so much about what's happening. You know, we have something called proof of concept, so we can test all these solutions and until they work. If they don't work, no one gonna tell you, look, no. So it's that for me. It's the perception that has been given to us that we are young, dynamic, innovative, and therefore we can do so much. So we better capitalize on that, both in public sector but also in private sector. So yeah, so you know, Elizabeth, trying to ramble around the perception, I think for me it has been working magic throughout Rwanda. Like young people are being welcomed in all these big offices where they can do, you know, they can decide on emerging technologies, they can decide on the next you know, data protection law, that they can be in the parliament, negotiate a startup bill because they understand what startups are, because they're mostly 70% of the startups founders in Rwanda are young people. So you need to have them on that discussion. So as much we think about private sector, you know, international law firms, but also we need to think the young people need to participate because they're the ones then kind of like make the life easy for the private sector youth and young people. Otherwise, then you're working hard in the private sector, but you're not connecting with the public sector. And yet the whole entire policy decision making, policy discussions are being, you know, pushed by these people who are disconnected from the realities of the young lawyers. Yeah, basically that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yes, I forgot to mention that Michael Butera went to Strathmore Law School in Kenya. I have to take props for that, and also to the Harvard Law School.
Oh, you had to mention that. You had
I
to
had
mention.
to mention Kenya first. Yeah. Anyway,
All
in the
right.
spirit of East Africanism.
All right.
Right. So
You nearly caused a diplomatic incident.
right. So we go on to Silva. You had initially mentioned something about the mindset in amongst young lawyers in the region, and I believe Michael had also talked about that. But Mr. Kayondo, kindly take us through what mindset shifts are necessary for young lawyers to move beyond traditional law firm roles and into the broader global legal ecosystem.
Yeah, well, thanks. Interesting. I think for me to answer that, I need to first understand right now, where is the market? I must say my perspective is more skewed towards private practice and business because I'm a law firm founder here in Uganda. So I have a firm that has 11 other partners and about 15 associates and all that, which is fairly big by standards. And we've built all that in the last 5 years. So we've got chambers ranking, IFLR, and all that. So my perspective is more towards that sort of things. I'm not so conversant with the not-for-profit sector and, well, the public sector. My interaction with them is regarding how, you know, if they're helping me with licensing work, with all these regulatory approvals and that kind of stuff. Anyway, so right now, the global legal market is $1 trillion in terms of revenue. And it's anticipated to reach 1.6 trillion by 2033. That's a growth rate of about 5% per annum. However, much of all this revenue is mostly North America and Europe. The African, we could say, I mean, in many regards, when you talk of Africa in terms of legal spend, people look at Nairobi, South Africa, Egypt, and maybe now to some extent Kenya. We've seen lots of that startup funding coming through, especially on the venture capital and private equity side, which are growing. So for me, I'd be reading that key trend, that for you to be known or for you to have that sort of mindset, you need some bit of international connection. And how do you get this? I mean, the models have never changed. If you're in professional services, the idea is to have people in the room speaking for you or about you if you're not there. So in Kenya, you'll find like, you know, Coulson Honey starts, my good friend Philip and Paras, you know, busy driving the show, then they come together, form Bombers. What that means is they have a cross field in South Africa, they can a further foot in Nigeria, that if any piece of work comes, then you know they're able to send it across all those multiple jurisdictions with so much ease. Now, that's one bit of model. For you to participate in that, you need to be willing to be a small fish in a big pie, you know, that you know you're going to be one partner, but there are also 400 other partners. You might have sacrificed some autonomy and decision making, that you become answerable to the wider group regarding decisions you take. On the contrary, most lawyers are very independent minded. Everyone is a lawyer in their own right. We want to be big, especially if we are young. You have the assumption that you know it all. You've been born in an era. You know, we are the most exposed generation in Africa. We are the most educated generation. We are also the most interconnected. You know, right now on the call, you might find we have colleagues from Ethiopia, Burundi, Rwanda, just, you know, you can just imagine the power of that. So for me, that kind of vulnerability to know that, look, yes, I'm a lawyer, but I cannot do it all. I cannot do M&A in the morning. In the evening, I'm doing land. In the afternoon, I want to also have an opinion on SpaceX and satellite law. Then tomorrow, I also want to do a divorce matter. I mean, I think the era of the all-knowing land friend is gone, and that we have to agree. The other mindset shift, I think, is ability to learn and collaborate in groups. If you're going to do all these other things, if you're going to do work around health and the law, definitely you're going to collaborate with health experts. If you're going to do all this work in emerging finance, definitely you will not escape investment analysts or actuaries or, you know, all those types of things. And all of these have a sense. You have to know the limitation of your law degree. Unless you've maybe gone back and added maybe a CFA course or an SCCA, you will not find many lawyers who can interpret financial statements, for instance. So when you're in a room and people are talking debt to equity ratios, the cost to revenue ratio, and all these types of things that are going to impact the risk allocation that you're going to put in the financial documents or in the legal documents, then that's things start to make sense from the perspective of you knowing the right entities or the right sort of resources to surround yourself with. And maybe the last thing I can say is, for me, what I've also seen is the attitude shift to know that you will not just be collaborating with law firms. Yeah, there is government, there is all this, but we also now have alternative legal service providers. So the competition is not local. I do not see a fellow Ugandan lawyer's competition. I do not see a fellow Kenyan lawyer's competition, because of what comes to Africa. It's not even 5% of the 1 trillion that I mentioned. Africa is growing, but African law firms are not growing alongside, because you find the structuring of all these documents, the big acquisitions, all the holding companies are still in foreign jurisdictions or in offshore places. So the little we get, help me do a local due diligence, and then you put on the law firm website, or assisted in a due diligence of acquisition of 30 petroleum stations across East Africa. But you know, the pie you took is just like 5% of what another person took. So that ability to know that some work may not be as profitable as the other. I mean, if you do trademark registrations now, you're very lucky if you make a profit of $100 off a trademark registration, isn't it? It's fully bread and butter. It's so commoditized. Drafting of insurance policies. What are you going to charge the client? $10,000, which policy are you drafting? You know, some of this stuff is so commoditized now that some entities are actually selling off those business lines. I know some international businesses that have sold off like their IP registration portfolios because they no longer make economic sense. So, but that could be the opportunity for a young lawyer in Uganda, that if you're able to structure maybe a tech platform that aggregates those types of that type of work, you know, then maybe you're able to make revenue on scale. That, you know, if maybe you're plugged in associations like Inter or maybe WIPO and they're sending you all this trademark work, then you know that for me, my model is I'll do 100 trademark registrations a month. If I do 100 and I'm making off $50 each, that's a cool how much lawyers and math, 5K, 50K, you know, that, you know, you couldn't have very few lawyers make that. So that kind of thing and cultivating it is where the discipline is, because that's going to take you between 5 to 7 years. And in those 5 to 7 years, you're going to prepare yourself either by doing an international secondment like ILFA, which will, like me, make you end up at White and Case. Then you're able to see how does the law firm with 45 offices around the world do business. And once you come back, then you're able to try to replicate that across the region. You are going to write a number of articles in very strategic journals. You're going to write in Chambers and Partners. You're going to write about noble subjects, because part of the trust building aspects of a professional is thought leadership. So you're going to demonstrate that expertise through platforms like speaking at ELS, or organizing a master class, or organizing SMEs in your community. If you're going to tell them all these digitization aspects of tax that are happening, that KRA is doing, or Uganda Revenue is doing, or the Rwanda, you know, utilities regulator is doing, then you must be able to also have that demonstrative capacity that gets to granular details. If you tell an SME, how do you file a tax return online, you must be able to come with your computer and laptop and say, you know, then you're able to have 100 of those SMEs telling you, that's our pain point, do it for us. And even if, you know, you're charging on average little money, then you're able to be relevant to that community by doing the work that either the big law firms can't do or that requires structure. I will speak more about how to position for such opportunities later, and this will maybe lead me into the aspects around also what can East Africa Law Society do for us, or Law Society of Kenya, or Uganda Law Society. What can they do beyond organizing such platforms? What more do I see in terms of future possibilities? Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Silva. Now we'll go on to Ms. Manyasi. Basically, we'll be talking about how can young legal professionals effectively engage with international organizations such as the UN and NGOs in order to advocate for systemic change.
Okay. First, I would like to call back what Silva just pointed out when he said we should collaborate in groups. That was a very brilliant point, because most of the times you're told to network and form partnerships. And for a young lawyer, for them, that will translate to basically joining professional groups like International Bar Association or the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, you know, such organizations. But most of the times they never think about the other people that you might work with that are not lawyers, that are not within the legal professional space, but they still work within that sector that you're interested in, or in that sector that you want to contribute in within that organization. And most of the time, even when you get to work in any capacity, whether as a fellow or an intern within that organization, you need to interact with them. So basically, when a young lawyer is networking and looking for partnerships and basically collaborating with other people, they should consider even outside the legal profession, who are the If it's a project, who's the project manager, who are the other people working within the project, who are the financiers, who are the, basically the accountants, how do they work, the social workers, get to know them, get to interact with them, and get to learn from them as well. Because most of the times when we're looking to engage international organizations, they will be at the front, the people you will be talking to, not necessarily even the legal office. There's also internships and fellowships. When you apply for these opportunities within the organizations, they usually put out call-outs and advertisements for the same. I usually call October to March the fellowship season, because a lot of these organizations put out advertisements for fellowship that you can apply to. So take advantage of those as well. There's again, Silva mentioned writing articles in journals and demonstrate, because that's how you demonstrate your knowledge and your skills, basically. There are various legal journals around the world, not even within the universities in your country, that usually call for articles. They look for journals. They give you a certain topic and a criteria that you can write in, and sometimes it's an emerging legal issue that you can contribute to. Take advantage of those interviews and call-outs, write your articles, submit them to the journals, have them published, because they demonstrate your knowledge, your skills, your passion for that area that you want to engage in. And also they might communicate some of the points that you want to be integrated in the system itself. Because if you look at young lawyers, one of the things that serves as a barrier for us affecting systemic change is the lack of access to the people, the policymakers, and basically people who can drive that change at the ground level because of the positions they have. It might be your legislator, it can be the governors, it can be an executive member, cabinet secretary, but you do not have that access to them. So a journal might catch their attention and might communicate the knowledge and the points that you wanted to drive within a certain industry. And there's also policy submissions. If you look at international organizations where they call for policy submissions like draft and basically draft recommendations to rapporteurs and human rights bodies. Yeah, so basically the main thing that you're looking at is for you to participate in those international organizations and to advocate for systemic change, you have to collaborate with international legal networks at all spaces, not just the legal area or the legal sector, or just legal officials. You need to expand your bandwidth throughout the sector that you're looking to influence change in.
Thank you very much, Davina, for that. I'd like also to ask you to talk about any key challenges that can be faced or that are faced by young lawyers when they're pushing for legal reforms or social justice initiatives in a global scale.
Yes, when it comes to some of the challenges that we face when we are advocating for social justice and initiatives on a global scale. The first one, it's usually the political resistance. This is the governments may resist the reforms or the challenge, and they look at it as a challenge to the authority or the economic interest, basically. They look like you're trying to disturb the status quo. They look like you're challenging the power that they have over the citizens within the country. And most of the times that comes in with threats and repression. Yeah. So sometimes you face threats, arrests, harassment that it's uncalled for because of the position that you held, or basically, or an opinion that you gave on, let's say, a policy or an article that you wrote. And another one is usually funding constraints. Advocacy and legal reforms efforts require financial muscle most of the time, because you're not only talking about the manpower, there's the resources that you use for research. Sometimes you'll have to invest your own finances into the projects that you're trying to carry out, or into the research that you're trying to carry out, because the communication between maybe the body, it's an international body that was receiving funding from a government, they haven't received funding, and it affects your work at the end. So yeah, financial constraints is another barrier. And we also have, like I mentioned earlier, limited access to decision makers. You're a young lawyer, you're starting out in an area. Most likely your net doesn't spread as far as to reach policy decision makers, to reach government officials, or to reach the people who can put a signature to the reforms that you've recommended and be like, yeah, okay, fine. That can be put into a bill or can be put into a policy or into a notice. So that limited access to decision makers sometimes makes you feel like you're seated in a room and yelling, and the room is empty most of the time, yeah. And the slow legal process as well. You might give reforms to a policy, you might give reforms to a bill, you might give reforms even to just a contract. And because of the bureaucracy that is there on different levels of the government and the different bodies that might be involved or the different agencies, it takes time to effect the changes. And sometimes the reforms that you actually gave might be affected by new developments within the area. For example, in the tech sector, some of the reforms you might have given, let's say, for example, when evaluating OpenAI in 2023, might not even be effective today because of all the upgrades that they've made and all the changes that they've made. So everything that you've given becomes obsolete. And the fragmented efforts. When you're working with a local organization that works with another international organization, sometimes their communication is fragmented. That is, there's a lack of coordination between the local branch of the organization and the international one. So it kind of affects the work you're trying to do. And it might also affect the implementation of the work that you submitted or implementation of the research that you just gave or the project that you want to come up with. So those fragmented efforts are also barriers that some of the lawyers face in itself. Yeah.
Right, thank you very much for that. Now we can go on to Mr. Butera, who had introduced us to the area of access to justice in Africa and the role of technology in that. Maybe you can take us through any specific tech solutions that have successfully addressed the systemic challenges in the African or East African judicial systems. What specific tech solutions have you noticed or seen to be impactful in addressing these challenges?
Thank you, Elizabeth. So there are various, so we've been trying to have a very much coordinated, like continental, widespread of collaborating on different projects. So, for example, for Rwanda to be the most outstanding ISMS, which is an electronic integrated system of cases. How do you manage a whole entire case flow from the inception of a case? If there's an allegation deposited with the Rwanda Investigation Bureau up to the last point of sentencing. So we're trying to exploit all potential areas that we can introduce, tech in that chain, from the very, from the crime investigations, evidence collection, electronic evidence presentation, and of course, analyzing them up to the point when you're projecting the rehabilitation, status and all that. But most of, I think, and I would be very honest, and many people keep talking about AI and all these tech solutions. And when you ask, practically speaking, how many, tech use cases that we can really point to and say, we have these solutions. For example, we've been talking about evidence reconstruction for some time now. But again, the question has always been, who is inventing? And unfortunately, most of the African countries, the governments are not entrepreneurial states. We don't think in terms of actually investing as a state being an entrepreneur in itself and saying, okay, I'm going to try out this specific solution. And if it works, of course, I have these, I have the intellectual property in this solution, and then it becomes governmental and I can scale. I can sell a random government solution to Namibia or to Botswana or to Kenya. So we kind of like have left all these contributions to private sector. And I hate to say that then that makes, the government very passive in many ways. So we are known to be risk aversive. So we don't want to take risks. We only want to tell, to point out specific limitations, challenges, and then invite private sector to come and do the work. But then again, that could have been okay for me. But when you as well invite private sector, you're likely to get, you're likely to get international companies actually getting all these markets. So the governments have, for some reason, automatically qualified themselves to be very passive, risk-free, a bit lazy, not forward thinking. We just want to say, okay, you just give us solutions. So that is changing. And for me, that to change, you definitely need very many young people who can think, because again, the idea is that all the best minds have gone to school with, both from Strathmore and from Harvard, from other great schools. All of them end up in World Bank or end up in big, private international law firms. Idea being that once you go to the government, then you become passive as well. So you just sign documents, or you're hooked in this bureaucracy and paperwork, and you can. But then what is changing is that then at least the government of Rwanda is recruiting very young, brilliant minds who come just to think. Once they get problems in being in access to justice, they now prompt ideas, but also they can actually collaborate with private sector actually to come up with solutions. Some of them, we have data analysts, we have computer scientists, we have software engineers in government sectors, where if I can come up with, if I can identify a specific solution within a public sector, I just need to make a call to another public sector member to say, okay, can we actually come up with a solution to this? Governments have a lot of money, they have funding, even they make a lot of financial sense when they're applying to these grants, more than actually private sector, which they're always like, assessing against risks of not scaling or actually making losses. Governments are unlikely to do that because they have all these policy measures to actually accommodate this new solution. There are many ways you can go about it. But back to your question, and I had to lament that, because at least for me, it seems to be the realities on the ground that the governments have chose to just by default become bureaucratic, risk aversive, passive, and let the private sector on the other side is known to be very risk taking, extremely forward looking, very disruptive, innovative. We are these people, so we need as well to kind of like cut that divide that is, is black and white. One is this and the other is this. And only people who can do that, I think, the young people. Because when you're defining the private sector to be innovative, risk-taking, forward-looking, we're basically talking about private, young people within the private sectors. So again, so in Rwanda, we're trying to have this solution. So we have the ISMS, which is an electronic management system. We have something called Amategeko app, which is a new large language model that will help, people in remote areas, wananchi, citizens who can now interact with these. It's both a web portal, but also it's a mobile app. So basically, what you do is you lodge your question. It might be, I have suffered specific injuries in this specific circumstance. What are my chances in court of law? So now this app is gonna, kind of like in a very, street language, we call this street law, in a very street language, for anyone to understand what are your chances. Actually, what is this crime? How do you qualify this crime? Does it even have a legal term? If it has a legal term, it's a jargon, definitely. Can you now, cut it down to specifics? What am I facing? So that citizens can really start actually understanding, even the procedures, right? But very much nailed down to what they understand. These are solutions that are tech-based. We just passed our fintech policy so recently. We're trying as well to see, access to justice sometimes also translates to access to funds to specific small and small and medium enterprises, but also people. So we're trying to see. So basically, the fundamental idea that runs through all these innovations that Rwanda is trying to do is how can we use tech to make sure that the most sophisticated things that they were so disconnected from the rest of the population can actually be a simple access as getting this information, as getting a constitution being analyzed by chatbot in a proper Kinyarwanda language, our procedure of criminal law, our procedure of civil law, what is this judgment mean in terms of practical implementation of it. So we're trying to do that on that one aspect, but also we're doing a lot of work in medical law. We're doing a lot of work in evidence reconstruction. How can we reconstruct evidence, digitally speaking? We just launched another idea called digital crime scenes. So until recently, we've been really witnessing a lot of crimes and fraud being committed over credit cards and other payment systems. So we're trying to replicate the same idea of physical, crime scenes now into digital crime scenes. Can a credit card be a digital crime scene? And how do you go about investigating that digital crime scene? Kind of like just importing all these physical tactics now into digital, because that's where we're heading. Most of the transactions, are going to be carried over the internet and these electronic payment systems. So we are learning very quickly to shift the world from the physical to the digital, and the law has to follow suit as well. So law was always a tool that organized a society, but very much physically in terms of a physical world. But most of the society now has migrated its transactions, business, its interactions, be on internet, be on X. Most of the crimes that were committed physically, it would be, for example, harassment, but now there's more of online harassment than physical harassment. And how do you make sense of this specific physical crime now translate to? As well, insurance, we are launching something called UBI, which is the usage-based insurance, which is, we're going to start having telematics devices in cars, which can record real-time data, on how, for example, drivers drive, the behavior of a driver. Do you overspeed, right? Do you take sharp cornering without, notifying the person behind you? Do you take hard brakes? So this real-time data of how you drive then should inform your premium charges, right? If you're a better driver, then your premium is going to go low. If you're terrible and very risky driver, through your amalgamated data, then the insurance company is going to deal with. So you're kind of like introducing real-time data in making decisions in underwriting risk and all that. So, and that came not from insurance company investigation, or rather understanding of it. It came from how can we reduce accidents in Kigali, right? If we have this, if these telematics, they'll, and we had evidence from other countries, 21 states in the US have already implemented this telematic technology, where we learned from the reporting that, after the introduction of telematics, a person is likely to become a better driver because you have constant a telematic machine communicating to you that, oh, you're overspeeding. That was a very sharp break. And also we learned that when you attach a price tag on someone's behavior, then they're likely to behave much better. You just need to influence let them know that there's a penalty to that. So that penalty on one side and the awarding of low premiums when you drive better, drivers automatically became better drivers, and there was an evidence that the accidents went low by a very big percentage. So again, that came from policing and law enforcement, but translated into insurance. And I think that's what Silva really mentioned about this cross-cutting. I think a great lawyer needs to understand all these dynamics at a cross-cutting stage, where you say, okay, if I'm trying to come up with a solution in tech, it will definitely affect policing, law enforcement, traffic, but it's going to touch on insurance, but it's going to touch on the behavior of the people as a society as a whole. I think that expansiveness of a lawyer really beats almost everyone, because then you're trying to come up with solutions that are addressing a lot of challenges. So you think about all this when you're exposed, and I know you didn't ask this question, but I thought I would take it up because I'm speaking to fellow young lawyers. Is that this only happens when you actually in a network of people, right? I learned about UBI when I was just exchanging on LinkedIn with the CEO of the Progressive, one of the best insurance companies, and they mentioned this. But you have to be in that position to be exposed. So I spend at least 2 hours on LinkedIn every day, not because I'm trying to connect with everyone, but I'm trying to see, who might be my next strategic partner. And we have all these big posts that help us actually to reach out to people. Well, if you reach out as a chief technical advisor, you're likely to get a response by the end of the day. So how do we really capitalize on all these big offices being given. So once you start having that network, someone talks about you and, they refer to someone else, then before you know it, you even have access to funds, not your funds, but another a startup that is trying to come up with a solution. You just become really, this person who can connect to people work. I think we need to, do that cross-sector connecting, networking. There is none of the connection that would go lost if you really understood your assignment as you're trying to help this continent move forward. You're trying to connect everyone to anything. Again, just I think last point is all this again happen not accidentally. You definitely need to define your trajectory. That's when you actually see, what falls in with your journey. All right. If you then that if you want to go into academia, you need to really, do proper research and come up with a professor that is extremely progressive, that will expose you to, for example, postgraduate program or something. But for example, if you want to branch out to international organizations, then you very quickly outline all the elements you need in that. But you definitely need to design, to draft, to define out a trajectory and where you want to head with all this. Thank you, Elizabeth.
That was very insightful. Thank you very much. Again, we're seeing the importance of being able to collaborate across the countries and share some of these solutions, because as we are saying, we have the same issues within the various East African jurisdictions, and therefore there's the need to collaborate and not impose, but adopt these solutions across the board. Right. Now we're back to Silva. And again, before even we get back to Silva, I'd like to encourage our attendees to ask questions in the chat box or give comments with regards to the discussion, and then we'll be able to deal with those at the tail end of the discussion. Now, back to Silva. Again, the previous speaker has preempted the discussion on
not really. There is still a lot more to discuss.
On the opportunities that are accessible globally. And now, can you kindly briefly take us through the practical steps that a young lawyer can take to overcome the barriers in accessing these global opportunities? Because we know they're there, but how then does somebody get to access these opportunities? And then after that, you can tell us briefly about any critical skills then that the young lawyer needs to adopt in order to stay competitive in this evolving global legal landscape.
Thank you. Interesting question. I think it's Shakespeare who says, "To your own self be true." and I think for me, this is the guiding framework. To yourself be true. So as a young lawyer, you're going to do a SWOT analysis of yourself, your personal circumstances, economically, socially, all these kinds of things, to know how to position right for these sorts of challenges. So some people, before taking advantage of the international opportunities, you might have to first take advantage of the local opportunities. Well, for some people, and local can be deep local. I mean, if you are not from Karen or Mutaiga, or Westlands, it could mean taking advantage of opportunities in Busia, So, and there are ways to do that. So for me, my mantra is opportunities multiply as they are seized. There is this sort of very compounding effect to the little things we do. An article today in the local newspaper, a TV appearance tomorrow, a strategic position paper, a LinkedIn post here and there. So I think for me, that's a good starting point. Then you have to know, what's your view of law? Do you see law as a service or law as a platform? For me, I see law as a platform to enable me to do the things I want to do. I do law as a hobby, and I think that's why I'm not stressed. It's a career, it's a profession. But law for me is a hobby. It engages my intellectual faculty. It enables me to meet people of all character, of all shapes. And then it gives me a professional privilege that just with that ID, I'm able to access almost everywhere I want to go. Maybe except that it doesn't allow me to enter the Ritz-Carlton. But everywhere else it allows. You will not go to the Kempinski and show your LSK ID. Yeah, the guard might, be happy to see you, but that's not. But then I also love to ask locally: are you a legal architect or a legal plumber? Legal plumbers love solving things, being the ones fixing. The client is arrested at the police station. You enjoy going there to solve that yourself when you could actually send a clerk or someone else. Legal architects see in terms of patterns, in terms of frameworks, in certain. For me, I think I'm more of a legal architect. I'm such a very big picture person, thinker. I don't like mundane tasks of, photocopying documents or notarizing. I feel like that doesn't really excite me. So you will not probably see me as a registered commissioner for oath in Uganda or a notary public, because probably I'm busy engaging the minister on, something I feel is important and that kind of stuff. So after you've done a SWOT analysis of yourself and what you can do, then from there, I think you're going to put things or your personal interests in a bucket of short-term, medium-term to long-term things that you have to do. So you have to put that. So, for instance, you know that the pay for young lawyers is not that great across East Africa. So you might have aspirations, say, of being an aviation lawyer, but that's not going to feed your daily interest, your daily, until to a level when you're stable enough to do it. Because the whole of Africa contributes only about 2% of global aviation travel. I don't think even the largest in the region, Ethiopia or Kenya Airways, uses even more than 50 lawyers, So unless you're exceptionally good and you're talented, you're going to find things that are first going to give you that cushion. The immediate pain points. If you're in the corporate and commercial space, tax is always a pain point for a lot of SMEs, a lot of business, even individuals. I am a lawyer, but I really struggle with the tax code. I do not understand what's happening. I just want to see my returns filed and that kind of stuff, So maybe you might have to do that. A big chunk of practice in East Africa is land conveyancing. So a lot of this conveyancing work still happens in the sense that either people want you to submit for them title deeds and all those kinds of stuff. So once you have your existential needs addressed, because much as we have all this tech and all this sophistication, human needs have never changed. It's food, shelter, clothing, So once you've addressed those existential needs, then you'll free up your mind to think about the big opportunities. And so for me, wherever you hear a complaint, I think that's an opportunity. But this needs to be tailored with reality of where you are. For instance, I can give you one shocking fact. Just the maritime practice on the Mombasa coast is bigger than the entire legal service sector in Uganda. Shocking, right? I know law firms in Cape Town that only do wine law, from acquisition of vineyards to production and advising wineries like Robertson. And they are bigger than some law firms in East Africa in terms of revenue. Obviously, if you're in places like, California, definitely tech is going to make sense. There is a reason. I don't know in Kenya, but in Uganda, I've been looking when a patent was last filed in the Ugandan IP registry. But But if you're in California, definitely you'll be busy with patents work because there is a lot of that that's happening. But in Uganda, you may not be able to live off patents and industrial designs. The most common IP work is trademark registration, especially of foreign marks that are doing defensive marks. So once you've analyzed your market and your interest, then you're able going to design your career around that and say, from there, what can I do in terms of, initiative? So if you've identified, for instance, you want to do fintech, you only know that that's going to keep growing up with digital credit, digital insurance, digital frauds, digital lending, all these. Then you start looking at what might be the regulatory gaps in here. Can I maybe write a crypto position paper and send it to the central bank? Can I maybe write something on fractional investing and send it to Capital Markets Authority so that those regulators, whenever they have a conference or a seminar on that, they'll invite you and say, look, by the way, this guy has written on this, has done research. And in that room, usually there will be sector players. So you start spreading your business card to those types of players who are made turn into clients. And then for the initial start, you must be willing to give some freebies because no client is going to trust you with a big thing for the first time. They'll first give you a few thoughts here and there, 1, 2, 3, then you prove yourself that you can do the work. Then they will market you through word of mouth. Still, I insist, with all these tech advancements, with all these nuances, word of mouth still remains the best because the human is made to trust fellow humans. Yeah, I can give you ratings on LinkedIn or on Google, but word of mouth, still just a person, especially a respected leader, maybe a CEO or a CFO or a chief sustainability officer or the chief information officer saying, Elizabeth is our person in data protection. Imagine if that's coming from like the president of the Kenya Bankers Association, or, the IT Association of Kenya, or, or it's coming from the president of the East Africa Law Society. So with those types of things, then you're able to slowly build yourself into a platform and not just become a lawyer, but also a trusted advisor. I think for me, transitioning from just a lawyer into a trusted advisor then enables you to do much more. Let me leave it at that, and then maybe, through the Q&A, I'll also be able to address some specific interventions that come my way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And even, I believe after this, we will all have to have a meeting with ourselves and do a SWOT analysis as to and check whether you're a legal architect or a legal plumber. Right. We can go on to Ms. Manyasi. And because this particular discussion has heavily relied on the fact that, the end game based on the discussion is to make money. What happens then to the young lawyers who need to balance their career growth and their passion for social justice advocacy, which might not really pay as much? How can young lawyers then do that? How can they make that particular balance?
Okay. When it comes to identifying a balance between making money and social justice, you have to, first of all, identify synergies. So when you're identifying the synergies between the area that you want to practice within social justice, because social justice is a really large area, and making money, you have to look at where they align with your advocacy interests, where they align with where you want to practice. And once you identify that area where they come together and they match together, you can look for now opportunities within areas or seek for roles in firms that are now paid within that sector and area, because some firms to give that opportunity to practice within an area that impacts social justice, but money isn't forthcoming. And as much as you would like to tell somebody it is the passion that matters, bills are still there. You cannot ignore the daily challenges and the daily economic basically struggles that a lot young lawyers, especially young lawyers, go through. So you have to identify a synergy first. So where do they align? Where do they meet? Once you identify that, you can identify the roles that you can actually look for within different organizations that pay for that specific role that you're looking for. And then number two, it goes back to, are you a legal architect or a legal plumber, as Silva kind of pointed out? Because once you answer that question, you can now build a niche expertise. You specialize in a certain field. Most of the time, when you're looking at social justice, you're not going to practice everything. You're not going to be an environmental law practitioner, and tomorrow you're a human rights law practitioner, and then on Monday you're a tech justice practitioner. You'll have to build a niche within a certain area so that even as Silva had pointed out, when the CEO says that this is our guy when it comes to tech policy, this is our person when it comes to human rights, you have that expertise in itself. You have that niche, you have built that niche, and they are pointing towards a person who has an understanding and owns the skills and the knowledge within that area. Then you also have to leverage side projects. Now, sometimes you'll be working in a role that pays you, but doesn't really allow you to practice within the social justice advocacy space. That's where the side projects come in. And the side projects can be gotten the same way Silva, again, pointed out. You go to an event, you network with people, and then the first projects that you'll work on will basically be freebies. So those side projects are not like lost energy or lost skills. They help you build within that sector. They help you build and connect with mentors and peers working within that area. They help you build on your knowledge and your industry network in itself so that you can actually grow and within your career and basically create a path towards your passion and possibly in the future earning from it. So those side projects become part of your portfolio when it comes to social justice advocacy. That's for the young lawyers who are working, but the work that they are carrying out doesn't really align with the social justice advocacy, and they have failed to identify the synergy with the current role that they are working in. And then the other one is strategic networking. Most of the time, when you're a young lawyer, you'd want to participate in each and every event. So you see an event here, you're like, lawyers will be there, and other people in different industries will be there, you go. But you do not have a certain point, you do not have a certain strategy, you do not have a certain, basically, point that you are trying to basically arrest or trying to take advantage of. So when you're trying to network and you identify those different networking areas, you have to be strategic about networking. You have to be strategic about the mentors you connect with. You have to be strategic about the peers you connect with. Because most of the time when you meet with the people, let's say you have identified the person who you want them to be basically your mentor, your potential mentor. Most of the time they'll ask you, what do you want out of this mentorship relationship? What do you see it driving you towards? What do you see you getting yourself getting out of that relationship in itself? So if you aren't strategic about selecting or connecting with your peers and your mentor within that sector, those questions become hard to answer. And basically you trap yourself in a vortex of a lot of basically opportunities, but those opportunities do not lead you to where you want to. So you have to be strategic about the networking. And there's also time management. Again, this one ties to the side projects. You have your work that you have to do in 8 to 5. So when you pick up side projects or when you pick up pro bono work, you have to set time apart. You have to set clear priorities. You have to allocate time for that advocacy. You have to allocate time without compromising your professional development. So you have to be really organized and you must learn how to set clear priorities. Yes, you have your work that you have to do. There's also career growth to think about. but you don't want to compromise your professional development, because at the end of the day, if you do, it makes no sense as to your career growth and the balance that you're trying to establish. And to tie it back to everything that I've been speaking about, basically consider policy and legislative work. That's the easiest route that I think most lawyers can contribute and use as career growth, and to even balance their passion for social justice. Like Silva Founder said, you can write a paper to Capital Markets Authority. You can write basically like a recommendation to a paper that has been released by Parliament, or a notice that has been released by your local county government. It doesn't always have to be the national government, right? Or international bodies. You can look into that work and submit your work, and yeah, and you can take it from there, because as Silva had pointed out, they might look back and say, oh, Elizabeth had written a paper about this topic, and we're hosting an event on that. We can invite her as a panelist. We can invite her to contribute on the same. So that constant effort in making sure that you're present when legal issues are being raised, you're present when topics within social justice and advocacy are being raised, is very important. Yes.
Thank you very much for that. And because you've talked about personal development, maybe we can then go on to Mr. Butera. Now, just adding on to this discussion on personal development, and because we've previously discussed the importance of legal innovation in modernizing outdated justice system, what skills can young lawyers then develop in order to stay relevant in the area of legal tech and innovation?
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think is yeah, one is I think it's more of a attitude than actual skill. Like you can't really learn, you can learn so much. I mean, I trained myself with some basic coding for lawyers because I really wanted to understand how algorithms function, how ChatGPT projects the next token line, and how that whole entire feedback you get from all these models, large language models, come to you. What's the mechanics behind it? How are the data sets being selected and then trained over a period of time? For how long should it be trained, right? So all these things are really things that you can learn from enrolling in a course, or actually learning from another expert, or reading so much about it. But it really, I think mostly it's that attitude, saying that, we're heading that direction. We're definitely not going back. Everything is being innovative in many ways, so much disruptive ways to go about it. For example, in Rwanda, fintechs used to function as banks until recently, that someone had really to understand actually what a fintech mean. In strict sense, both legal but also practically, what is a fintech, which is a financial technology, but what amounts to a fintech. Can fintechs take deposits from clients or not? Because that's a mandate of a bank, and there's a whole entire structure of a bank versus just an application, or a system that helps to, for example, link between people and access to finance through banks. So then you have to learn very quickly, but it has to be an attitude of need. Like you really understand that you need to get on top of things, right? You are in a law firm and you want to talk to the partner and let them know that there's a way you can actually manage the whole entire projects of the law firms without paying a lot of money in specific a project management software or an app, right? Or you really very versatile with learning using a lot of different tools like Airtable, and you can organize the whole entire files of the law firm within Airtable. Again, it's just that attitude of need of just doing things differently, right? And then once you do that, then you can outline different skills. If it means to understand blockchain more, if it means learning how to automate most of the legal processes, then you can easily do that despite being a lawyer. Again, there's also these new fields that we think they're very fancy. When someone talks about AI regulation, everyone wants to dive into it. But it's until I think you gain like proper experience and learn actually a few skills on what AI means. And therefore, can you, for example, in Rwanda, you wanted to pass a legislative bill on AI, but we're asking questions, how can you regulate something you don't produce, right? So you need to first at least come up with the legislation that allows production of AI, training of person-specific data and all that. So skills, there so much out there that you can learn and can leverage and can definitely expand the edge of your career. It might be tech transfers. There's so much happening. We just received BioNTech. It's a pharmaceutical company coming from Germany to Rwanda. There's a lot of negotiations happening. How do you draft a tech transfer, right? Are we going to just allow medical trials in Rwanda, or are we actually, are we in this partnership for the whole entire spectrum of property rights, right? We need to understand how, mRNA vaccines are being produced. We want to understand the technical know-how behind it, and how do we now write a tech transfer like that? That's, I think, a skill, and tech transfer goes with licensing. So because the world is really going to produce a lot of money on systems which are no longer hardware systems anyway, it's now software systems. So anything that touches on that, including licensing, it's definitely a new thing. And there's just so much, especially public sector as well. It's skills that can enable automate what used to be physical processes and very lagging behind processes. So there's intellectual property has a lot of elements of AI, has a lot of elements in tech. So that's another field that can be studied, not in the traditional copyright, trademark and all that, but also other areas that we think that are emerging, right? Like collectives and all that. So I won't really outline and list all the skills, but I would say it's an attitude of need. And then once you get that right, I think I need to do this differently. I need to innovate this. I need to do things different from the traditional ways. And then automatically to appear to you that you need a specific skill, and they're out there, and then, you get to grab them. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Now, again, we are just about to begin winding up this discussion, and we are getting into the Q&A section. Again, I want to encourage everyone with any question to the various panelists today, or any clarification in anything that's been mentioned. I can put that in the chat box or in the Q&A section. And just before we get into that, maybe in 1 minute, because there's something important I believe that had been spoken about before, and that was on the role of societies such as ELS and even universities in preparing the young lawyers for this evolving landscape. Maybe every panelist can say something on that. What is the role of the law schools and legal institutions in preparing young lawyers for these opportunities? Because of course we know that, especially as an academic, what we teach is basically a traditional preparing the advocate for the young lawyer for the traditional roles. Maybe we can start with Silva, 1 minute on that.
Yeah, so, well, for me, I think ELS probably provides some sort of initiative around what can influence maybe curriculum changes at uni, because ELS is an aggregation of lots of people. Clients are here, lawyers are here, and all this. So if that feedback is well curated and taken back maybe to our law schools, it can. But also there are things ELS or Kenya law, whatever, can do. One of the things I'm really concerned about is right now, all our countries, we do not know the market value of legal services. If someone asked you, what's the total market value of legal services in Kenya? So what's the total market value of legal services in East Africa? If a young and curious person is to join you, yes, you're encouraging me to be a lawyer. The bankers know. They also know their contribution to GDPs of their countries, so that when they are speaking, they're able to tell the president and all, look, we contributed 30% to GDP, this and this way. They are able to lobby and negotiate better. But the second question that intrigues me, and ELS should probably have this data, is if someone asks you, what are the top 5 fastest growing areas of law in East Africa? I'm a law student, I'm studying, I want to focus. Even within social justice, if someone asks you, what are the top 3 fastest growing in social justice for the next 5 years? I can bet you, if you go right now to the website of the American Bar Association or the English Bar, they even know the number of jobs they are going to create in the next 5 years. But here, you just end up with a saturated market to produce 10,000 graduates. You do not know where the jobs are going to come from. Then you end up undercutting the market, because what do employers do is they'll hire you for a year or 2, and once you're starting to ask for pay raise, they'll fire you and just hire another unemployed graduate. And the cycle never ends. Everyone just is in this abusive relationship with, especially early career professionals. So for me, I think those are the kind of, and maybe the last point is, I think East Africa Law Society, Kenya Law Society, Uganda Law Society, Rwandan Bar, they also need to have some sort of professional sandboxes where we test some of these ideas. If you say AI for lawyers, what are you talking about? Because not each and every law firm can access Gemini or can access Copilot. Even for some law firms, just accessing premium accounts for Zoom is a challenge, So we need to be able to keep those barriers by having these entities we've entrusted with providing professional leadership become more practical in some of these aspects. Thank you so much. I hope to see you soon.
Right. Thank you, Silva. One of the questions that we have is addressed, I believe, to Michael, and this is on the role of AI and its impact on our daily work as lawyers, especially when it comes to litigation. Do you consider AI to be an obstacle to our practice?
No, thank you. No, actually, to the opposite. I think that I work with a lot of lawyers, and recently I noticed a very interesting thing. So I realized that on this specific Friday, I was expecting a lot of reports from various departments, and then suddenly I couldn't get the reports. And I asked, what's happening? Because they were very quick. I said, oh, so when I tried to use ChatGPT, I realized that it had frozen. So it wasn't actually giving feedback to and then I realized that without knowing, people have really now internalized AI as part of their daily, work. So they just have this information they put in ChatGPT and it gives them a proper, very fantastic report. So the question for me that I became very aware that, oh, well, actually I've really dived deep into it now that if ChatGPT today stopped, actually a lot of things would stop, including drafting and all these submissions and all that. So the question is now, how can we use all these AI tools, systems, and products to actually make sure that the work of lawyers is fast, efficient, effective as well, so that you can actually save time to be a great lawyer by thinking too deeply into other things that really matter. So, and my mantra has always been, I will automate what's automatable, and then I will really invest my work, my brain, my thinking, my ideas into other things, constructing new stuff, thinking about other areas that I can improve on that output. Only to say that, there was no ChatGPT, there was no all these open AI, but it doesn't mean that we were perfect. It might have been actually a shortcoming that how do I work in a meeting like this one and I start taking notes instead of really concentrating on what Elizabeth is saying and actually have an AI, note taker. I have found it very, very accurate, more than what the notes I've taken, right? So every time a note take, an AI assistant takes notes, then it really helps me because it gets almost everything that I couldn't get. But I think the balance, it's a very, very delicate balance you have to make and say, okay, I can always delegate, relegate specific work, like can be automated, like just taking those notes or drafting that first draft, and then now invest my time to be creative with the draft, right? Maybe get a unique case, ChatGPT didn't get, or craft a different argument, an angle that a judge would never have thought. Well, this happens because you have the luxury of time, right? You have a starting point. You have something you can work with. Um, the opposite is that you push back, and so what? If you push back, definitely you will have to do the actual work. Impressive, great lawyer. You're dedicating your time to almost everything. But we are competing now in a world where like everyone is racing to the output, right? And they can deploy all tools possible to have that output. I think it gets excellent by how much now creativity, which is really originality of your work, and that you put in on that. So just always count AI as an assistant of the very, 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 fast drafts, and then, dedicate your time as a very superior agent to the inferior AI. You can always see that in those variables if it can help, but I'm not against AI. If anything, I've encouraged people to use all these tools as long as they can make the work easier, but not shallow, right? Then you need to expand on all this. So you really dedicate the terms that you can work with AI. It's not an equal agent. You can dedicate the terms. You can set the tone. You can set the output you want. That agent who is setting is in another way. That's our new lawyering. That's our new way of actually lawyering. It's to come up with ways you can commission all these agents to perform the work that you'd have otherwise done. Now, that prompting, that commissioning is I think now the brilliance of the lawyer lies in how you can now instruct all these agents rather than so that's my take. Of course, this whole AI tech has been very hot, subjected to different debates on different spectrums. Some people had said, I have my boss who says, no, I don't want to use AI in my life. I would just stick with my, and it's fine. But in many ways, I have always produced work in a very shortest period of time. And no one really can tell whether, but again, I will let that be, a personal decision. But for the people I work with, I encourage them to do that. But be instructive, right? Be guiding to all these agents. It has to really look as a Michael's output after all.
Mhm. Right. Thank you very much for that. Again, it's good that you pointed out the different mindsets about AI. And I'm looking at the comments and I can see a few thoughts and comments from the attendees. Annie Rungu says she thinks that AI is unnecessarily disruptive. It takes away one's need to apply their brain in a particular situation. She was hoping that this webinar would change her perception on AI, but it hasn't. Right. I believe the SATI has even is continuing to have more webinars on this. Maybe she should also indulge in those. Maybe that will change her perception, but again, it's also okay to rely on the traditional methods. Again, we can have both sides, can embrace both sides. Right. We have one more question, and I think it's addressed directly to Silva. Since there are so many challenges facing young lawyers as newcomers in the practice, how would one overcome them and become a trusted advisor, not a mere lawyer and litigant? Maybe we can address that in literally 1 minute so that we can be able to do closing statements.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. But the thing is, I want to replace challenge with opportunities. What are the challenges? If the challenge is, plenty of unregulated spaces, if it's narrow economic base, if it's the different levels of political, social, and economic variations between our countries, I think all those are opportunities. As a lawyer, opportunities do not come to you when the law is clear. Clients will never consult you where things are clear. You are consulted more when things are unclear and undefined. So every moment is your chance to shine. One is be willing to do the work. we are living in an era of so much gold plating because AI can write your CV and all this. You're getting people who with very glossy credentials but can't do the work. The starting point is do the work. The second one, I think, is be willing to take the road less traveled. Your career trajectory might be different. There are things we've not talked about. You may even choose to be an expert witness on some of these things, not just a practicing lawyer or something. You can choose a thing and you become. But also, strategic networking was talked about. But what I usually do and which has been helpful is I do a lot of physical visits. Like if ULS is hosting an event or ELS in Rwanda, I've gone to see where Zipline is because that's where you'll find drones and unmanned aerial aircraft logistics in the region. I've been to South Africa, you'll see all these biotech plants. As a lawyer, because law is a software, once you visit these places physically, then you're able to start doing parallels. That the next time maybe a client is asking you about a specific thing, then it will not be what you've just watched on YouTube and read. I've tried all these tech tools for Litera, Ross, all these kinds of things. Then you're able to know that this is the kind of stuff. So, but nothing replaces doing the work. Let's do the work. Our generation is struggling with focus and discipline. Let's do the work. There is no substitute. And once you're a professional, you must be willing to have delayed gratification. You are not going to make money in your first 5 years of practice. Always count that as a sunk cost. It's not just lawyers, it's accountants, it's doctors, it's everyone, because the first 5 years are really for learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Again, we are out of time. So I believe because this is a very wide discussion, we'll have further discussions like this in future. But for now, let us conclude, and maybe each panelist can give us a 30-second closing statement or conclusion. Can start with Divina, then Michael, and finish with Silva.
Yes. So once again, thank you for inviting me to this panel, which was very informative, especially from the co-panelists. They were enlightening me about the different spaces within the legal sector. And basically, a parting shot is for the young lawyers who are looking to practice in human rights and social justice in the international space and to make their effect felt. You have to take into account that, first of all, you're coming into the space. So you might need to build your base. And your base is your knowledge, is your skills, is your network, it's your reach, and the work that you put out. So you're going to have to put in a lot of work. You're going to have to be willing to do the work. You're going to have to learn how to communicate with people within the industry. I usually say when you want to be a lawyer or when you want to work within the human rights and social justice space, you can't use I'm an introvert as an excuse as to why you aren't able to reach from many people. You have to come out of your shell and you have to speak about issues that are close to you or close to the work that you want to put out. You have to go beyond what is presented. Let's say, for example, if you use like AI or a prompt in ChatGPT, you have to use what is beyond that has been given there, because ChatGPT doesn't know the realities within the ground that you are in. You have to visit the areas that you want to work in. You have to learn about the areas and come up with solutions that, first of all, impact the society or the community that surrounds you. Learn your demographic. What problems do they face? How can you help? How can you come in with what you know and what you want to work with? Yes.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael. Mm-hmm.
Yes, no, thanks. I think I would just be very, very brief, is that I think that you need to, as a young person, I really take opportunity to be young in this context, that you need to avail yourself, but also move yourself very fast. So I think that being young accords you a chance to kind of like just be disruptive, take a few risks, change a few positions. But eventually, what you're trying to do is that strategic positioning, and I think it has been super helpful. And strategic positioning means that you consult your passions, like what are you passionate about, and what are you interested in, and then third is do you have some hard skill in that positionality that you are trying to do. And hard skill means that you can be very great panelists, speak on almost 45 panels per year, move around, publish a lot as you can. But if you really can't, create something, produce something out of you, and Mike is attractive in a way that he can actually draft a transfer license, and I have seen his transfer a license document really good. Or they can say, oh, he's actually really good in advising startups, right? In how they come up with the founders agreements and all that. You need to be known, by something that you can really create, right? So avail yourself, move yourself, but also move with those skills. And I think young people are very capable of that. I would want to say one thing is that I think risk taking is exactly this time that you need to do that. Change a few careers. Try to test out things. If public sector works for you, or if it's private sector, or if you can actually start something afresh, like something of yourself, there's something you can identify with. I think this is the time to do that, than later when you're trying to, to consolidate what you've done, stabilize, and then before you know it, you already have this big family, or there's a lot of expectations around you. So I think this is the time now to really navigate around, shoot those cold emails, write, reach out to people on LinkedIn, try to expose yourself. Look, I can do this. I don't have just a starting point, but I can do this. So yeah, avail yourself, move as much as you can.
Thank you. Silva?
Okay. So what I would love to say is, and this is quotable, I think the size of your relevance is directly proportional to the complexity of the problems that you solve. If you solve small problems, then you have small relevance. If you solve the challenges of our time, then you will get big relevance. Presidents, ministers, prime minister will always want to be around you because you're a problem solver. So, and for me, these are the kinds of things that maybe I'd encourage whoever is on the platform to look into. Things around this tax automation, things around our sovereign debt. Literally every country in Africa is under debt stress. I can't emphasize that enough for Kenya. Empower yourself to know public finance and sovereign debt. Things like forensics. We've talked of the future of crime and new crime and all these unresolved crime. Forensics for lawyers. Things around electronic frauds arising out of all these fintechs. Things around CCTVs and surveillance. I think private camera use is probably going to be one of the most transformational things from a data protection and point of view. Agriculture and food security. Things around GMOs, fertilizers. Take keen interest as lawyers, because what we put into our bodies determines our health, determines our lifespan, and also determines our brain quality. Because if you feed junk, definitely you cannot optimize. Things around health and fitness, and also things around elections and digital election frauds emerging. You've seen those in your Kenyan court system, but also spreading across East Africa. And I think Africa is the place to do it. All these things, such as zoonotic diseases, conflicts, border controls, and all these kinds of things, we should occupy all those spaces. Let's not just be in land, mortgages, and all this. Let's occupy the whole spectrum, because the law degree is the most versatile degree in the world. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Again, our discussion has to be cut short because of time. But as we conclude this discussion, it's clear that young lawyers have an incredible opportunity to shape the future of the legal profession. on a global scale. And by acquiring the skills that you've heard about, leveraging technology, expanding your networks, and staying committed to continuous learning can overcome barriers and thrive in international legal spaces. So I hope that this session has provided this valuable insights and inspiration to you to help you to take the next steps in your legal career. And I want to thank all the panelists for their expertise, for even donating their time to us, and to the audience for engaging in this conversation and even choosing to spend your afternoon with us. Let's continue working together to break these barriers and to build a more inclusive and dynamic legal community within East Africa and globally. So I want to give the mic back to Gabriel and the society. And again, thank you so much for listening to us this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that stellar moderation. Indeed, the session was not only thought-provoking, but insightful for some of us who have keenly listened in, and listening to the panelists speak got me thinking about a number of aspects relating to career choices made and how we can, expand our frontiers going forward. So at this juncture, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of the society, for donating your time, for taking off time to research and make this session as informative as possible. Special thanks goes out to you, our esteemed panelists, Mr. Michael Butera, Mr. Silva Kayondo, Miss Divina Mayansi, in absentia, Miss Esther Naro, and Miss Christine Kamuruchuch. That name bullies me a bit, but it's really humbling that you all made time to join the session. And thank you all, our dear participants, for making this time to join us for 2 hours for this very informative session. I hope you have taken off some insights from our expert panelists who are thriving out there on how we can make our careers thrive as well. So as we come to a close of this session, I'd like to inform you that next week, yet again, we have another 2 webinar sessions lined up, and this time we'll be talking arbitration. So the East Africa Law Society, in partnership with CIAB, have organized a very special webinar session for you. Please log on to that session because you don't want to miss it. And if you've been watching the news lately, East Africa has become notorious for forced abductions and enforced disappearances. So we'll be also hosting a panel of experts to discuss some of the emerging rule of law issues therefrom. Otherwise, we want to thank you. This is just a precursor to our forthcoming Young Lawyers Convention 2025. This discussion will continue during our Young Lawyers Convention. So please be sure to join us when you see that call out. Please express interest, and we'll be happy to host you. Otherwise, from us at the Secretariat to you, we wish you a very lovely afternoon and a blessed week ahead of you. Thank you, and a recording of this session will be shared via email, and we will be working on certificates of attendance and certificates of appreciation to our panelists. Otherwise, have yourselves a lovely afternoon and goodbye.